What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Football Talking today. We have got a bit of breaking news, and we're going to discuss it right away. Manchester City have been banned from European club competition, Champions League, Europa League, and I believe the Europa League 2, that second or third European competition as well as on that list, but I believe that starts sometime in the next 2 seasons, so that is on there. After being found to have committed serious breaches of Uefa's club licensing and financial fair play regulations. Now this we're going to talk about in depth. It is some huge news, obviously. They're also going to be fined €30 million, which is £25 million, and they have the option to appeal, which they will, and we're going to talk about all of that in a minute, but we're going to read through some of the news and other things like that. But let's talk about what they've done first. They're being suspended and fined for we'll just read it right off of here. Reports allege City, who've always denied wrongdoing, deliberately misled UEFA so they could meet financial fair play rules requiring clubs to break even. Apparently they inflated the value of their sponsorship deal, which means they said it was a little bit more than they were actually receiving, and misleading UEFA as well. I believe there was another one on here. Yes, there is. So they've also, on top of inflating the value of their sponsorship deal, kind of putting that on their break-even report. It's sort of the same thing, but it's on 2 different reports, really, so it's been caught multiple times. So it's 2 different infractions, but of the same type of make, really. Manchester City did put out a statement. The club has always anticipated the ultimate need to seek out an independent body and process to impartially consider the comprehensive body of irrefutable evidence in support of its position. In December 2018, the UEFA chief investigator publicly previewed the outcome of the sanction, and he intended to be delivered to Manchester City before any investigation had begun. So they are going to appeal. And I assume that appeal may bring it down a little bit. We'll have to see. If I had to guess, these are pretty genuine, pretty serious charges. I would assume that maybe the fine comes down a little bit if this goes to court of arbitration. But for me, I think the 2-year ban will continue to stay, and this is going to be huge for a variety of reasons, a variety of teams, and a variety of players. Now, if Manchester City have been lying about the amount of sponsorship money coming into the club, it means they're way over it. For a 2-year ban and a £30 million fine, or a €30 million fine, I guess, £25 million fine, we're talking way over the mark. And if we're way over the mark, players are going to leave, and they're going to have to sell a lot to bring in. So any players they currently have approaching that free transfer mark may just leave, as well as selling a few players on. Angelino's already on his way out. In the summer, that will be permanent, £25 million, I believe. There may be some other players on the way out, possibly at the fullback position, where there's talks that he wanted to revamp it anyway. If he were to sell Mendy on, Cancelo, we're talking the ability to go ahead and redo that whole position without spending a huge amount of money, and getting some money in. Midfield, I don't know. There's just a lot here. David Silva is going to leave. His wages will be off the contract. They may be forced into selling now Leroy Sané. Maybe Sergio Aguero's time at the club gets cut short. They do have 2 really high-paid, good strikers. They may just let Aguero move on. He was always talking about leaving at the end of his contract anyway, so he may just move on. So there is we may see a pretty big haul of this team coming. One more thing that would affect the team as well, Pep Guardiola, will he stay through this? There was a lot of talk already that this would be his last year. I was under the impression that this would be his last year, and he's had some cryptic kind of things recently. He had a quote here last time where he said if he didn't win the Champions League now in this kind of environment, he'd consider this portion of his career a failure. That may intend that this is his last year. But
Sorry,
my bloody phone. But if he's leaving, another thing they're going to have to do here, another thing they'll have to deal with, they'll have to bring in a new manager. And not only bring in a new manager, but if they want one of quality, they may have to pay a release clause, and they may not now have the money for that. They are going to lose a lot of money on top of the fine. These teams that get to the semifinal of the Champions League make around £80 million. Over 2 years, theoretically, we're talking upwards of almost £200 million, that, including the fine, that are not going to come into the club, as well as, some other things in that nature. So for Manchester City, this is massive, absolutely humongous. Similar thing happened to AC Milan recently. Well, not too recently, but recently enough to be compared it to. They were banned from European football as well. So, I mean, it's an absolute issue, isn't it? But it's got what's so fascinating about it is it's got so many different variables, so many different things that can go right, can go wrong here. Obviously, from top to bottom, this is not a good thing, but it is for a couple of other teams. Now, really looking for that 5th spot. I believe we'll get some confirmation on it soon. But from what I've read, some people think so, some people may not. But for the moment, we'll consider it that the 5th spot will be a Champions League spot now. And Manchester City's, regardless of where they finish, it'll just be as if they're not in the table. So the top 5 will get into the Champions League minus Manchester City because they won't finish outside the top 5. So at the moment, it'd be Sheffield United. But there are some teams in there now with a genuine chance at getting into that spot. Sheffield United, of course, who occupy it now. Chelsea will feel good about themselves as they've been on a downtick. And Sheffield United have been climbing back into that. They're only 2 points back at Chelsea, though they have a game in hand. So Sheffield United will feel good. Manchester United, Everton will feel good. Wolves will feel good. Tottenham will feel good. And for Tottenham, this could be, genuinely a really, really good opportunity. Not because, obviously, they can get back into the Champions League and things like that, but for all things considered, when Mourinho came in, this almost seemed like a gimme season, where one of those seasons where you kind of just figure out what you have, what you don't have, get rid of the toxicity. Christian Eriksen's left. There are a couple other players who should be leaving on a free come summertime that have been a bit of a thorn recently in that atmosphere. Kind of clear that up. And for Mourinho, if he were to fall into a Champions League spot, that would only help this rebuild in tenfold almost. I believe when they came in, they kind of just wanted him to steady the ship a little bit and just ride it out and see what we could do. But qualifying for the Champions League almost moves this rebuild forward an extra year or two, and very, very quickly. That could be huge. Sheffield United, who don't spend a ton of money, who don't have a ton of money to buy players, falling into the Champions League money could be massive. And when you come up and you don't go straight down, it's that second year that's really, really tough. That second year is always really, really tough. Now, they've bought rather well already, Sheffield United, without spending loads and loads of money. But Champions League money is something else. And if they can bring that in and invest in the squad, we're talking 5, 6, 7 years of stability if they invest it right. And that, that can get the club way up off its feet and away from that whole situation. They'll almost put them in a position Bournemouth were 2 years ago. At the moment, Bournemouth are kind of struggling and kind of falling back into that relegation kind of scrap. But before that, they had 3 or 4 years or 2 or 3 years there where they were just fairly comfortable, and you knew they'd finish around anywhere between 8th and 12th. That's where you kind of feel Sheffield United will be at minimum. should they get that fourth spot and get that investment into that club, that money into the club, the ability to upgrade everything in the club, it'll be some huge stuff. Another team we're talking, well, obviously all these teams are kind of in the same spot. But Manchester United, another club, finishing fourth would benefit quite a bit, or fifth, obviously, in this situation, in a Champions League spot, per se. Manchester United, it may convince Pogba to stay. I don't think he's going to stay either way, but it may. And they obviously rate him rather highly. Bringing in new players, I mean, it seems that they struggle a little bit to bring in players, and the board kind of struggled to spend a little bit of money. I think this would move them forward another year or two as well. Manchester United obviously still have that major European pull, but with Champions League, it just looks a lot better than it would, otherwise. Everton, another team who are only 3 points back of Sheffield United at the moment. Ancelotti has turned them right around. A really good manager, a manager with European pedigree, money to spend, a new stadium coming. Champions League football would be the icing on an already rather large cake for Everton in the near future. I believe they would theoretically be trying to get into that Champions League spot next year, more realistically probably the year after, but right now he's got them playing really, really well, turning down huge bids, of course. For Richarlison, an £85 million bid came in from Barcelona over the January period. Everton are in a good spot, and to really fall into a Champions League spot would be absolutely huge. And then Wolves, another team that can go ahead and push for that spot, who are right on the verge of being really, really good. They've got some great players around them right now. I think they're rather thin, unfortunately, for them. But they spent most of the summer kind of just securing loan deals into permanent deals, and that cost them their transfer budget. I think they wanted to get through this year in a kind of Europa League place. And next year, bring in proper reinforcements and then go for that top four spot, because they've definitely got the ability. They've shown it this year with their wins over City, taking Liverpool rather close. They've done rather well, but depth-wise, they all seem rather tired, and outside the starting 11, they don't have a ton of depth. And if they can get some proper squad players and some more players to bring into that first team, it'll obviously take them really far. And to get into that Champions League spot this year instead of next year or the year after would obviously bring them forward. So there's a couple of teams there who wanted to be in and around a Champions League spot next year or the year after, realistically, who could fall into that spot there. It'll be a heck of a fight. As we said, Chelsea feel rather good about themselves. They're now in that third position, quote unquote. So they've got, if they win their game in hand, they've got a little bit more breathing room than they did earlier. But, things were closing in on them after their really good start to the season, but it's starting to come back around a little bit. This also genuinely benefits Liverpool, whose closest challenger are 22 points back in Manchester City, who could theoretically, if they're going to win the title this year, which they look like they're going to, they could walk the title again next year. The other teams outside of City are so far behind this current Liverpool team that, Manchester City may have handed, 3 or 4 years of dominance right to Liverpool. So we'll have to see about that. Liverpool will try to strengthen, I imagine. So to stay, they're just well ahead, aren't they? Leicester are way behind, Chelsea way behind, and then the rest of the teams are fighting for that fifth position. We're talking a really big gap that just got theoretically much bigger, considering City's position and what will happen. I don't see their summer going. I don't see them getting much better in the summer, even if they move a lot of players on and find a way to move money around and things like that. I just don't see them bringing in huge names with no Champions League for 2 years and I don't see them bringing in enough money to go out and buy big names and have enough depth to go a full Premier League season. I just don't see it. I think they have money. I think they're going to need money coming in, a decent amount of money coming in. Barcelona are kind of in that position right now where they have to get rid of, it's like 80 million or something before the summer window or something like that to please their board or something. I imagine the numbers for City are relatively close to that, and with the Champions League money kind of out the window in terms of income, it could be a lot more. We were talking with the fine close, maybe theoretically almost 200 million pounds that won't be coming into the club. So it's one heck of a situation. So a lot to think about in terms of Manchester City. Let me know in the comments how you guys feel, who you guys think are going to finish fourth, and we'll end it here. We'll just have to see. We'll just have to wait and see. They're obviously going to appeal it. We'll see what the appeal comes to. But their summer window is, their summer has gotten really, really interesting with Pep, with the money, with the transfers. It's gotten really, really interesting for someone who is on the outside looking in. But guys, that's going to be the end of this video. Hope you folks, of course, have enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more. And peace.